We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. Matthew 13:44-46 contains two short and related parables about the value of the kingdom of heaven. The men who find the treasures of enormous value sell all they have to acquire their discovery. Both stories show that inclusion in the kingdom of heaven is worth any amount of sacrifice. Whatever is lost in pursuit of the kingdom of heaven is a small price to pay, considering the value of what is gained. Matthew 13:47-50 contains a parable about fishermen. Fishermen use a dragnet to bring up a large catch, which includes many kinds of fish, good and bad. The workers sort the fish, discarding those which are bad. Jesus immediately explains that this is like the angels who will come and separate the evil from the righteous at the end of the age. They will throw those who reject faith in Christ into the fiery furnace where there is anguish and misery. Matthew 13:51-52 concludes the section on the parables of Jesus with a question. Jesus asks his disciples if they've understood his words. The disciples say yes. Jesus uses one more short parable, comparing a scholar trained in godly things to the master of a house showing his old and new treasures to someone. Christ, for his part, is teaching both the meaning of older scriptures, and the new fulfillments coming from God. This also means the disciples should teach others what he has taught them, the unified meaning of Old Testament scriptures and the teaching of Jesus. Our first verse says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field." Jesus is speaking in parables to describe the kingdom of heaven. This time, he compares the kingdom of heaven to a treasure found hidden in a field. The man who finds the treasure could not simply take what he found because it did not belong to him. Instead, he leaves it there, sells everything he has, and buys the field in order to legitimately get the treasure it contains. It was common in this era to hide money or other belongings in the ground, as banks simply did not exist. It would have been more common then, for a stash of valuables to be left in the ground because the previous owner died, without letting anyone know they were there. Jesus uses this idea to describe the kingdom of heaven. Laws and customs suggest that so long as that treasure remained buried, it was considered part of the field, so it was the property of whomever owned the land. The treasure could not simply be taken, that would be theft. However, if the field's owner sold the land, he would also be selling any buried valuables. The new owner would be legally free to dig up and take such treasure. Christ's message is that the kingdom of heaven is worth trading for everything a person owns, in order to come into possession of it. It is worth any sacrifice to belong to the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 13:44. Verse 45 says, again, "The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls." This parable likely also fired the imaginations of Jesus' listeners, because it pictures unexpected good fortune. This one features a merchant in search of fine pearls. In ancient times, divers would hunt pearls in the ocean waters that surrounded the Middle East. The best pearls could be sold for enormous sums of money. This is not much different from how large, pure gemstones, such as diamonds, can be worth staggering amounts of money in modern contexts. Jesus will continue to show how the kingdom of heaven is like such a pearl. Verse 46 says, "When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it." Again, Jesus is saying that the kingdom of heaven is worth the cost of everything we have in this life. The pearl merchant isn't giving away his possessions for no reason, in fact, he's drastically increasing his wealth. The idea of selling all he has might seem radical, but it makes perfect sense given what he gains in return. It is worth the cost of our entire lives to be included in the kingdom of heaven. The value of what we gain in eternity is far above what we can experience in a short earthly life. Verse 47 says, "Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish." In this story, Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to another scene which would have been familiar to most Israelites. It would have been especially meaningful to those who lived and worked around the Sea of Galilee. This describes a common process of fishing, which is the use of a net. An especially common form of net fishing is sometimes called trawling, which involves sweeping a net through the water. Alternatively, a large net is thrown flat onto the surface of the water, and sinkers pull it down, trapping everything underneath inside the net. Either method gathers up everything it surrounds, including many varieties of fish and animals. Some of these are useful to a fisherman, others are not. This is the central idea of the parable: the net collects everything, but not everything collected is kept. Jesus will show the fate of the captured creatures in the following verses. Verse 48 says, "When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away." What happens next is common sense: the contents of the net are sorted. Some are considered good, meaning they're worth eating or selling. Others are bad, meaning unusable for anything at all. The fishermen do the work of sorting through all the different kinds of fish, and throwing the bad ones away, while saving out the good in special containers. Verse 49 says, "This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous." The fishermen who sit on the beach throwing out the bad fish and saving the good ones represent the work of the angels, at the end of the age. Jesus is describing the judgment that will come when he returns to set up his political kingdom on the earth. That judgment will begin with the angels sorting and separating the righteous from the evil on the earth. As the rest of Matthew's Gospel and the New Testament will show, those who are with Jesus, saved by faith in him and his death, for their sin on the cross, will be declared righteous. Those who have rejected Jesus will remain in their sin and their status as evil. Verse 50 says, "And throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Those found to be evil on the day of judgment, anyone not saved through faith in Christ, are cast into a place of terrible distress. This is often referred to as a fiery furnace, often described as a place of crying and teeth gnashing, traditional expressions of great misery. This is Jesus' usual picture of what we commonly call hell. In these parables, Christ does not provide details on what causes a person to be sorted, either into the kingdom of heaven or into hell. The point of the parables is simply that a separation will occur, that God is going to classify people into one of only two categories. However, the Gospels and the remaining New Testament explain the criteria clearly. The righteous do not become so on their own by their good choices, Romans 3:10. Instead, they are the ones who receive the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe, Romans 3:22. Those who reject this path to righteousness through faith in Jesus are identified by the sorting angels as evil, children of the devil, and are thrown into the furnace. Verse 51 says, "Have you understood all these things?" Jesus asked. "Yes," they replied. Now Jesus asks his disciples if they grasp what they've been told. The disciples claim they do, but it's certain they don't understand as well as they think they do. Jesus' teaching about the kingdom must have introduced them to several new ideas. Like most Jewish people of that era, they likely expected the Messiah to immediately overthrow Israel's enemies, and set up Israel to prosper in the world. Jesus has taught, in parables, that the kingdom will start small and grow large over time. He has also taught that the righteous and the wicked will live together, side by side, until the day of judgment comes. Still, it is worth any sacrifice to be included in the kingdom, because a day of judgment is coming in which the evil will be removed and thrown into the fiery furnace by the angels of God. Whatever Jesus' core group of disciples truly understood, it required adjustment. They had to reassess their expectations for what the coming kingdom would be like. In the following verse, Jesus will show why it is important for them to continue to work at understanding what he is teaching. Our final verse says, "He said to them, therefore every teacher of the law who has become a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house, who brings out of his storeroom new treasures as well as old." Christ has asked the disciples if they understood his explanation of the parables. They have said they do. Now he responds by referring to scribes, who at that time, were Israel's teachers of the law. In a very meaningful sense, these disciples are being taught deeper truths by Jesus, and so are like scribes trained for the kingdom of heaven. As such, the disciples' work would be to teach these truths to others, both old and new. The image Jesus creates is that of someone wealthy who presents the treasures of his household. Some of those items are old. Some of the treasure is newly acquired, but still greatly valuable. Jesus pictures teachers of these great truths as those who show both God's revelation in the Old Testament scriptures, and the new revelations of God's truth through Jesus Christ. Those teachers would need to show how these treasured truths fit together. Finding and gathering. This, in fact, is exactly what Matthew does in his Gospel. He often references the old treasures of Israel's scriptures to show how they are fulfilled in Jesus' work and words. The other men gathered before Jesus will do the same as they teach the Gospel in the years to follow, 2 Timothy 3:16. That work will require them to understand Jesus' teaching in these parables. Finding and gathering. 1. God's kingdom is worth giving all we have and all we are, Matthew 13:44-46. Experiencing life in the reign of God is worth our total commitment. It is worth going all in. It is a good thing that it is worth it, because a life lived under the reign of God also requires our total commitment. 2. We need to learn to navigate between the values of the kingdom and the world, Matthew 13:47-50. God will send his angels to sort through the good and the bad at the end of the age, but until then we must navigate through this world with the Word guiding us and directing our values. 3. Be discipled as a scribe of the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 13:51-52. Jesus stated several times, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." In each instance, we hear Jesus take from God's commands and make a new life application from the ancient wisdom of the scriptures. Jesus shows his followers how to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.